Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Lorber. I'm the director of Rain Taxi, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 20th Twin Cities Book Festival. We're on the third day of this virtual event, and there are so many great things going on with it. We miss you in person, but we are having a blast online as well. 19 live author events like this one, and if you miss them, you can catch the replay. You see on screen with me our ASL interpreter, AJ, who is providing interpretation for several of these events. We want to thank the University of Minnesota Libraries for their support in that. We also have a handful of great presentations that are pre-recorded. We have a Minnesota Writers Mashup that is worth checking out, and the launch of our new chapbook, which features 9 Black poets of the Twin Cities. We're very proud of it and hope you check it out. We also have an exciting exhibit hall filled with scores of publishers, organizations, and authors that are ready and willing to show you what they have been up to. To give you a taste of what's in there, I want to share with you now a brief video by one of our sponsoring exhibitors. Check it out.
I am scared of death, not my own, but his.
I came to Perpich because my old school wasn't a good fit for me. I came from a really big school that didn't focus a lot on art and didn't think I had a place in the world. And I came here and I now know that I do.
I'm scared and I don't know how to be not scared.
We care about academics and we care about success. And like a lot of our academic teachers are artists as well. And so they understand how the artist's mind works and how to teach academics to an artist.
Because he has a piece of the sun inside of him, burning like the last piece of light on earth.
I think Perpich gave me a voice. I think before I came here, I didn't really know who I was and what I wanted. And Perpich gave me a way to find that and to find myself and to realize that I had a voice and that it was worth listening to.
Thank you so much to Perpich for their sponsorship, and make sure to check them out and all the great exhibitors in our book fair. Now I'm so thrilled to introduce this session featuring this powerful new YA book and its amazing co-authors. With us are Ibi Zoboi, best-selling writer of books such as American Street and My Life as an Ice Cream Sandwich. She's also an editor and an educator who has worked with a lot of community-based programs and arts organizations. Dr. Yusef Salaam had his life upended after being wrongly convicted for a crime he did not commit. And after being exonerated, he began sharing his story as a poet, activist, and inspirational speaker who received a Lifetime Achievement Award from President Barack Obama, among other honors. The book they wrote together is called Punching the Air. It's a novel in verse that tells the story of a young boy who is wrongly incarcerated. And to lead us through a discussion of their work is Lissa Jones, host of the wonderful podcast Black Market Reads, which is sponsored by another great exhibitor in our book fair, the Givens Foundation. She's also host of Urban Agenda, a program on KMOJ, which is Minnesota's oldest Black radio station. I'm so delighted that she can moderate today's conversation. I want to just remind all our viewers that at the bottom of your screen, you can ask a question. I know that the authors would be thrilled to answer. You can buy books, of course, and if you choose, you can donate. This festival is free, but we're a nonprofit, so anything you can send us will help us as we get started on 2021. Meanwhile, enjoy this session. And take it away, Lissa.
Thank you, Eric. I'm honored to be here. Ibi, Dr. Yusef, welcome. I'm thrilled. And thank you so much for the ASL interpretation. If it's all right with the two of you, I will get started right away. Is this all right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Fantastic. Ibi, if I may start with you, what compelled you to want to tell Amal's story?
Well, it was Yusef. Not just the fact that Yusef is a member of the Exonerated Five, but because I feel that I'm continuing what I wanted to do 21 years ago when I first met Yusef in college. He had walked into one of my classes. That class was African Civilization taught by Dr. Marimba Ani, who was a former civil rights activist. And once we found out who he was, because I remembered his case in New York City, I was in the 6th grade, and we were really inundated with the Central Park 5 jogger case, as all New Yorkers were. So once I found out who he was, I went after him for an interview for my college's newspaper, because I was the editor of my newspaper. I never got that interview. We ended up speaking for several blocks, walking from several blocks in New York City from our college up to Harlem. And that's where the conversation ended. I think he was around school, but I never really saw him again. And, things happened. So the assailant came forward. He was later exonerated. I became a young adult author, and we ran into each other again at a book festival just like this, but it was in person. It was not here in Minnesota, but it was the Las Vegas Valley Book Festival. And he was selling his self-published book of poetry. I was there to promote my YA novel, American Street, and I had publishing credits. He was self-published and had an amazing story to tell. And this was before the When They See Us series, and the rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. Thank you. I thank you. Dr. Yusef, you are a poet who spent so much time in a place that was so terrible, and yet you named a mall Hope, you and Ibi. Can you tell us, why did you choose to name him Hope?
It was the most quintessential thing to hold on to. It was the understanding that as soon as you gave up hope, you became your worst enemy. And that's something that you had to really, really hold on to with the molars of your teeth, because, you think about folks like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in prison, saying that he had to leave anger and bitterness inside the prison, or if he took it outside with him, it would destroy him. And so that to me is also letting me know that there was a lot of work that was happening inside in order for you to be able to even have a vision that one day you would come out of this hell. And as they always say, when you're walking through hell, keep on walking. So you have to be your own savior in situations like that, because you're the one doing the time. And as they say, do the time and don't let time do you. Because once you begin to say it's hopeless, it's over, it is what it is, then all kinds of domino effects, the trickle down effects of, everything bad begins to take shape and become a part of your reality.
So hope is the thing you hold on to keep your humanity.
Absolutely. Hope is necessary. Even in today's world, hope is the thing that drives us forward. Because without hope, then we wouldn't see a positive future. We wouldn't imagine the opportunity to change the criminal justice system from the criminal system of injustice to the criminal justice system. We wouldn't pontificate the idea of having a system that actually will one day become the embodiment of a Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, where the kaleidoscope of the human family is able to walk into the future, that future being a future that is peaceful, loving, kind, gentle, graceful, necessary for life-giving things that we all need.
Thank you. Ibi, why young adult? Why that genre? And was it Dr. Yusef's poetry that compelled you to write this book in verse?
Well, first of all, I have a degree, master's in fine arts in writing for children and young adults. So, when we first met in college, I wanted to be a journalist. And then I was a poet. And I worked as a journalist for a couple of years, but I found that there is more truth telling in children's literature. I could use metaphor to tell a truth. I can, there's something that Yusef often says, a quote by Frederick Douglass, and I'll let him tell it. Something about repairing children. What's that quote, Yusef? That Frederick Douglass.
Yeah, it's easy. I think it says something to the effect: it's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Yeah. So what greater way to build strong children through literature? And I know that this is what our culture does. with mythology and folk tales, this is how we build the consciousness, the worldview of a child through story. And that's exactly why I pursued writing for children. And of course, when I saw Yusef's poetry, one, we both did not want to forget that he was a child when this happened to him. Well, we didn't forget. We didn't want the world to forget. I especially did not want young people to be reading social justice books now, because there are a number of social justice books that were out when I met him and when I ran into him in 2017. But this particular story, I was just like, the world must know, as you know, there's something that you usually quote, Yusef. And this was before the When They See Us series. And when I saw him, I'm like, you're self-published. There is no reason that you should be self-published. You know, you can tell your story. If you're not a writer, if you're not going to sit there and, you know, churn out 2,000 words a day, because that's what it takes. He's very busy with other things. I can help you do that. So we wanted to tell the story of the Central Park Five through his eyes, but it was legally, it was entangled with the Netflix series. So we decided, okay, let's make it a fictional character. And he had to be 15, 16, just like he was when that happened to him. And there was Amal. And also he has a poem called, Yusef has a poem called I Stand Accused. And that poem, and he could share more about that, that poem served as the foundation for Punching the Air. And I was a poet, I'm a poet as well. And this was just a meeting of the minds.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I'm soaking in all of your goodness and all the things that you've been a part of in your life. Dr. Yusef, when you're thinking about poetry, do you have your poem with you? Number one, do you have your book with you? Oh, it's okay.
I have my book of poetry that we were. Yeah, this is the book that Ibi is talking about. It is it is my self-published book of poetry called Words of a Man, My Right to Be. 90% of the poems that are written in this book were written while I was in prison. And that piece that she's talking about is a piece that hopefully the world will get a chance to hear again in a very rich and powerful and perhaps spiritual way. We've been working on something, and some of the things that we've been working on has been to reinvigorate what that was and why that was, and how you really you didn't know who you were messing with. And I'm talking about that from the context of all of us matter. All of us are purposefully, we have a purpose in our being. And I think the most important understanding of that is that in our individual families, we matter. In our communities, we matter. But the problem is that when you look at the communities and the families that we come from, the rest of the world sees an individual being accused of crime and therefore going through the system and getting all that was due them, as my late great appellate attorney, William Kunstler said. But then we forget that the impact is greater than the individual. It is the family that the individual has and belongs to. It's the community that the individual has and belongs to. When you look at the fact that, you know, the Central Park Jogger case, as one example, is not an anomaly, it really paints the picture that the criminal system of injustice, this is the same wording similar wording, not the same wording, similar wording that the Attorney General used with regards to the Breonna Taylor case, where he said that this is a criminal system. And of course, he was talking about something completely different, but I thought it was so brilliant that he chose those words, because when we look at what's been going on around the country, we all have a front row seat to oppression. The whole world has been crying out that we have to first make sure that the most marginalized of us matter in society. And that word, or those echoes, come through the words Black Life Matters or Black Lives Matter. And then of course, all life matters. But when we look at these cases, there's something important happening, and we have to talk truth to power. We have to continue to shine a spotlight on things like this, because ultimately it's us that are going to change the system and become our ancestors' wildest dreams.
Thank you. Ibi, children's literature, young adult literature is more honest, you said. And I really agree with that. That's a profound idea. When you were thinking about Amal and writing, what came through was his humanity. For Black children, they suffer not only racism, but the specific kind of racism we know as anti-Blackness. And for Black children, the adultification of those children, like what killed Tamir Rice, the idea that our babies are not babies and somehow should be treated as adults. And this comes through in your writing for Amal. Will you talk to us a little bit about how did you grab his humanity and make it sing through these pages in a way that would impact the world in Punching the Air? I just felt him in a different way.
Well, again, I had this collaboration with Yusef. I think we really worked on it together, and it may not have been like getting the words on the page, but several conversations with Yusef. His experience really anchored who the character is. If I never was in conversation with someone who actually lived through this, it would have been a different story. And of course, there are other books that address the juvenile justice system, and they are different from this one. So because I had Yusef's wisdom, the way that he was able to reflect on his emotional journey while incarcerated, this is what really, really helped me build the character and his thought processes. And I also had Yusef's own writing while he's incarcerated to draw from. And there are about 4 or 5 poems that were written by Yusef in the book. And those poems, the voice, the metaphors that Yusef used, I wrote the story around those poems. So because Yusef was incredibly self-aware at 16, having written a poem called I Stand Accused, where he addresses the 13th Amendment without naming it, decades before the new Jim Crow and 13th, the documentary. So that's the kind of 16-year-old that he was. So I know those kinds of teens who understand social justice issues on a very deep level, and being well-read, right? And being culturally aware. And the profound thing was that he had that awareness while he was going through that major injustice. So this is the kind of kid Amal is. He can articulate what is happening and why it's happening while it's happening.
Wow. Dr. Yusef, would you be willing to share your piece of poetry with us that Ibi was so...
Yes, the specific one, I Stand Accused, absolutely.
Thank you, absolutely. I'll be quiet.
You know, I just want to kind of set the stage with this particular piece, in that here I was, I had just lost trial. And by just losing trial, I was a free person. I was out on bail, and I was going back and forth to court as if it was my job. And then when we were found guilty, it was the most tragic of tragedies that could happen, because the light of hope was being extinguished, or trying to be extinguished, through systemic oppression. And my last opportunity to say something found its way using the courtroom as a stage, as a part of theater. And of course we came, you know, one of the things that really is rich with both Ibi and I is that we remembered the 80s and how the 70s and the 80s of New York and the birthplace of hip hop, and how it was so rich with that spoken word artistry. You know, the hip hop artist becomes the griot or the jele of the day. And in my mind, I'm like, I have to say something. Everyone was saying to me that I should throw myself on the mercy of the court, that I should say something that could get me the least amount of time possible. But my heroes and sheroes were people of struggle. And so I turned to people like Denmark Vesey, Toussaint Louverture, you know, Assata Shakur, you know, Malcolm X, of course, definitely Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. as inspirational points and icons that I could draw from in this moment. And when they said, Yusef Salaam, do you have anything to say before we sentence you? I stood up and I said, yes. I said, I'm not going to sit here at your table and watch you eat and call myself dinner. Sitting here at the table doesn't make me dinner, just like being here in America doesn't make me an American. Let us begin. And I just want to preclude that thought to kind of explain something, because sometimes it sounds like a really radical idea, but just because I'm here in America doesn't make me an American is speaking to the idea that here we are being taxed and we are not being represented. The idea of America, we the people, never included me, the people. And so I'm talking about that through this beginning piece. Here I am in America, but it doesn't make me an American. And then I go in, let us begin. Stress is the anger that is built up inside. Rage is the anger that is no longer built. Taking on the sucker that soon you have killed. American free will doesn't mean you can kill. And take another person's life, you live your life trife. I'm a skill builder, so on skills I do build. Created given knowledge to this wise black man, soon to enhance my words across the land. I'm a smooth type of fellow, cool, calm, and mellow. I'm calm and laid back, but now I'm speaking so that you know. Got used and abused and even once put on the news without clues. Some gave clues, selling out like fools. Now check it. Who did what and who did who in? Put in a situation that you don't know what to do in. Some brothers go wildin', we're not down with them. Who would have thought I'd have to lock in? I stand accused. Checking the scene from how the situation was. Instead of getting facts, the media made you blurred. Now the people don't know. All they see is the media. Never hear the blame because they're constantly deceiving us. The DA's wrong. This is her master plan. This case is not a case. It's just a crafted sham. Yo, instead of trying to get your name made, it's reconstructing the crime that really pays. Islam, La ilaha illallah, being supreme over Satan, but no man is Allah. Yes, I'm a science dropper on the righteous path, so how the hell could I take a rapist path? Think about that and then think about this. All my friends, it was me they dissed, they're dismissed, because I don't really need any friends like that. Like when I really needed you, where were you at? I'm not dissing them all, but the ones that I called that went and dissed me. Like I was an inch small, like a rat, a mouse, not even a man, wrongly accused, like the knife's in my hand. How does it look? Me clock, now I'm shook, but like Matlock, soon the accused is off the hook. It's real when she remembers and says, damn, the cops did you in. I stand accused. And you know, just before we lost trial, there was the young man that Chubb Rock said, never forget, Yusef Hawkins, right? And he just lost his life through racism in America, in New York in particular. And I brought his case into the courtroom in the juxtaposition of what was going on with that case and our case. And so I say, you people stop. This racial disperse. Hey, yo, you seen that kid Benson? He's in a hearse. And so we take it to the Benson hearse fields. West got bulletproof vests. We had no kinds of shields. How does it look? They killed the black man, being black. It's time we take a stand. In our situation, you saw our faces clear, but not mine. Not because of fear. It's because the black race was disgraced, and for the Muslims, they must have felt shame. But I'm not to blame with the words you bought. The media took our words to paper, the ones the cops distorted. I told the cops truth like this, and then boom, they were smacking my man Corey Wise in the next room. Now I know why the rosters can't stand the Bobby line. They never help, they just babble on. I used to think the people and cops were cool, but who protects us from you? I stand accused. And it's such a the reason why I say it's such a spiritual thing for me is because I was talking about this thing that I realized, right? I came up in a space where my mother was telling me that she was raised in the Jim Crow South. But I also came up in a space where officers walked the neighborhood, they walked the beat. And so when I would see an officer, I would say, hey, how's everything going, Mr. Officer? And my mother sometimes would pop my hand. And I wouldn't understand what that meant and what was going on. But it was the reality that she was trying to educate me on, that what you see may not be what it is. And lo and behold, when I turned 15 into 16, I was awakened and introduced to the American nightmare.
Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Yusef. Ibi, lights on, lights off. The book strikes me every time with that. I thought I was ready. Well, I wasn't ready because every time you kept putting that in the paper, lights on, lights off. Is it a way of counting days? Is it a way of marking time?
Oh, well, yeah. all of those. It is a way of marking awareness and subconscious, consciousness and subconscious, just light and dark. And dark not meaning like heavy, all those connotations that we attribute to darkness. But darkness is where he was able to rebirth himself over and over again. And this is something I had to really think about, what happens to you when you're forced to contend with yourself and the four walls around you. You have nothing left but your own thoughts. And depending on what those thoughts are, it can be further debilitating or they could be liberating. And I can't help but know that Yusef's thought processes had to be liberating every single day. The poem, the very long poem that he just recited, is what he wrote when he was 16 years old. So imagine the kind of 16-year-old that he was going into the prison industrial complex with those sorts of thoughts in his head. So I think that sort of awareness that Yusef had is what liberated him every single day, even while he was incarcerated. And that's the message that we both wanted to put into this story, that there's nothing that they can take away from you when you have already been liberated in your mind, right? So there is an intellectual freedom that we want to, just to plant in the minds of young people. What is intellectual freedom? What is spiritual freedom, right? So I think Yusef had all of that, you know?
Oh, Ibi, I think
was-
about
it was-
literacy as freedom. Oh, go ahead, please, Dr. Yusef. Excuse me, I got so
Yeah,
excited.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ibi.
I'm sorry, but what's so profound in what is being said is that realization that what's real and what's not, right? So the idea of being in the light and the idea of being in the dark, and what it is that we are fighting for and wanting out of life. And I think that what Ibi just said is so truthful and so brilliant, because you can't take anything away from someone who does not want or need what it is that you're offering. And so in this case, we needed freedom. We wanted freedom, justice, and equality. But here it was, I was going into a system that I had already lost to. And I had to write these words. Those words became part of my healing, part of my mantra, part of what I can look at and read so that I could remember when I didn't want to, when I wanted to give up hope, when I wanted to cry out, and say, why am I doing this? Let me just, whatever, But reading words like that, reading my signature piece, The Revolution Will Not Be Televised, reading, I'll Meet You in Between Venus and Mars, all of these things were things that were not only written by me, but also given through me to remind me of what it is that I needed to be able to focus on to grow through this, as opposed to just go through this.
I think about how your book could liberate the masses of young people, our young people, who are locked in the prison industrial complex, who have lost hope to some degree, who need to know they're not punching the air. And I am so grateful, the two of you. Why did you choose that title, Punching the Air? I'm just interested. It's like shadow boxing.
Yeah.
But part of punching the air also is victory. It is that thing that we do when we say yes, or I got it, the epiphany. It is also preparation. It's also the shadow boxing, but it's also realizing that your arms are too short to box with God, so to speak. And so when you let go and let God, and you really dive into, it's like somebody saying, be still and listen. So what happens when you're being still and you listen? Punching the air also it's a lot of stuff. I mean, the way that we developed this book, everything was conversations, and it was like beautiful things that were happening, and it was really a beautiful marriage, so to speak, of thought and idea that we both were able to come together later on in life after having gone through what I call self-awareness, right? Here I was in prison, coming out of prison 2 years later. I'm in that class, bumping into the protege of Dr. John Henry Clark, who's telling me I need to do it, who in the classroom is a future masterful award-winning author, Ibi Zoboi. So it's not even like happenstance. These things happen on purpose and with a purpose. And when you're ready, they always show up and line up in the way that makes the most sense.
The ancestors are always planning. That's what I think.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. Ibi, we have a question from the audience, if you're all right. It says, Ibi, you mentioned the emotional journey. Dr. Yusef, can you tell us about this journey and how writing about your story through Amal has affected you? So I'm not sure if they're asking both of you, perhaps. So perhaps let's answer the question, how has this work affected each of you? And maybe start with Ibi.
Well, for me, I think we've had a number of these conversations. And when you say, Ms. Lofgren, am I saying it correctly?
You could just say Miss Jones.
Lisa, Ms. Jones. When you say ancestors, that this is our wheelhouse. Our professor, the professor that we had when we met, was teaching classes called African Spirituality and African Worldview. And we were learning that at 1920. She was approaching Blackness through an anthropological lens. And she refused to let us call ourselves Black. We were African. So we didn't study Africa as a country. It was more like understanding the continent. So in that sense, this is where I learned about the science behind ancestral communion. And we understand fate in a different way. We understand how people are brought together in different ways. There's a different worldview. One worldview will say it's fate or coincidence. Another worldview will say this is ancestors coming together. It's divine intervention. So in that sense, I never set out to write about a boy in prison. I have other books. I had another book that was supposed to come out this year that I had to push back and make room for this one because it was just like an epiphany in the moment. Like, I think I'm supposed to help you, right? I want to help you tell this story in a different way. And I think I'm dissatisfied with some of the conversations happening in my industry. Let's bring you on over here and deepen the conversation. We are all writing as adult authors, we are writing from our own imaginations. But what if I have Yusef come in and write and talk about these things from personal experience? So all of that is just finding purpose and answering the call when it comes. So it's changed how I look at writing. It's not just I thought of a story. It's more being in a certain place in a certain time and meeting a certain person and answering the call from the divine.
Ibi, I am delighted the ancestors called on you to testify. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I can't wait till your next book comes out. Dr. Yusef,
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. That was a really beautiful reflection. And I'm sorry we don't have more time because I'd like to sit with this a little longer. So forgive me.
Right.
I'll be sitting with this later on. Dr. Yusef, how has this writing with Ibi affected you?
This is a Sankofa moment. I look at this, and in the idea of Sankofa, you have to go back and get what you need in order to go forward. And so for me, it was the ability to dive into self in kind of like the Dogon idea of education and understanding. Do a jiri so bolo so bini so dai of my own self, and understanding that what I went through wasn't necessarily for me. It was something that I had to go through, but because you're not giving more than you can bear. So what's placed on you is something that you can handle. And once you realize that, you then get the strength that you need in order to fight the spiritual battle that you're going to be fighting. Because part of the technology is to get you to believe that you are worth nothing and you're worth everything. You are the future caretaker of tomorrow, and all young people are. And so psychosocially, that dynamic has to show up in a different way. And it was so beautiful because I think as we looked at all of the layers of existence that had been there, we got the opportunity in a very powerful way to say, okay, this version of part of my story through the Central Park 5 documentary was necessary. It gave people a 2-hour opportunity to re-educate and realign themselves with what the truth is and what happens in this criminal justice system that makes it so criminal when it comes to Black and brown people. And then when they see us, we got the opportunity to truly do a deep dive through the vicarious nature and the vicarious way with these characters re-portraying us, whether it was the character of my mother being portrayed through Anjanou Ellis. When I saw her portray my mother, first of all, when I saw her with the hairstyle and then the movements and everything, I'm like, that's my mom. She was channeling. She wasn't just acting. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that thing, I think, is the part that is brilliant. You begin to connect yourself with and align with things that are there because it is the path, it is the journey, it is what connects us all, right? And so in that process also there was trauma, because as I looked at the story and realized how every part was a piece of a puzzle, and you couldn't show the whole thing without seeing all the parts put together. And then it was like, and I always say this in this way, it was like the basketball games of back in the days where you had amazing teams, playing together. And here it was the team that always won, that perhaps had Jordan on it and Pippen and everybody. And Ava shot the alley-oop. And it was a slam dunk already, but it was like the alley-oop was shot back up. And it's like, this is such a powerful moment that whatever we do with it becomes a part of a toolkit. It becomes a part of the wherewithal that we can look to. So punching the air becomes water for the seeds of greatness inside of each and every one of us. It gives us the ability to look at our experiences and understand the why. Because as Nietzsche says, if you can understand the why, you can get through any how. And so for me, it was traumatic, but it was liberating because it also allowed me to continue to heal, right? I talk about often the fact that Dr. Maya Angelou, in her brilliance and profound words of saying, you should be angry, but you must not be bitter.
Yes.
She said, bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. But then she teaches us how to become alchemists. And we got to look at it from that perspective. Because when she says, use that anger, you dance it, you march it, vote it. She said, you do everything about it. And then she said something really, really important. And what she said, which was so important, was you talk it. Never stop talking it. Because see, what happens, especially with Black and brown men, we don't talk. We hold in. It metastasizes into something else. But to tell your story, to talk your story, to get feedback, to have a sounding board that allows you to be able to continue on. It is the part of the warrior who is out there in the field, coming back to the community, and the community is healing them so that that warrior can go back out there and fight another day.
Thank you, Dr. Yusef. Ibi, in my last minute, please tell the young beauties what you want them to know from Punching the Air. What do you want the Amals of the world to hear from you, Ibi?
Well, it's not just the Amals, it's every reader, young and old, who lays their eyes on the pages of Punching the Air. Art can be liberating, art is redemptive, and art is healing.
Ibi Zoboi and Dr. Yusef Salaam, who have answered the ancestors' calls to signify and testify. We are so grateful that you answered, and thank you for being our guest today. For everybody who's watching and listening, thank you for being a part of Rain Taxi's 2020 event in its 20th year. And please check out the rest of the festival. There's a lot of exciting things going on. And don't forget, punching the air. It's almost time to give gifts. It's not a bad time ever to give this as a gift. Bless you, Ibi. Bless you, Dr. Salaam. You take care.
Blessings, blessings. Thank you as well.
Blessings.
Thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, AJ.
Thank you.